Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, it's time to have a little bit of a look at a new Decidueye. Now, Decidueye, of course, really ruled the format for a little while when we had Forest of Giant Plants. But then Forest of Giant Plants got banned. And then, yeah, Decidueye kind of went away, and that was that. And weirdly enough, we've only actually had a couple non-GX Decidueye. We had the one from Sun and Moon, and then we had a promo one, and they were just both terrible. Like, they were rubbish. They were also the same card, incidentally. And they were both rubbish. So, it's only the second proper new non-GX we've had. So, is it actually any good? Let's have a gander, shall we? As always, our translation comes from the lovely Antoine Boulet. Lovely person, helps us out, much appreciated. And if we start off having a look at the basics here, it's got 140 HP, which frankly is not what we expect from a Stage 2 Pokemon. We're really looking at kind of like 150 like the Haxorus. So no, ladies and gentlemen, no. Retreat cost the one we do like, so it means you get free retreat with U-turn board. The weakness to fire we hate. With Welder making all kinds of decks like Reshiram and Charizard into the best decks in the format, we need a super compelling reason to play a Fire Weak deck at the moment. So if we're going to be playing this, we are going to need a pretty gosh darned good reason to actually do so. This is an horrendous weakness to have. The good news is, being a grass Pokemon, you can heal with stuff like Life Forest Prism Star and Shaman. But the fact of the matter is, you're not hitting a great weakness on anything. Although, if Fire decks keep becoming good, Water decks might become good, and then you got stuff like Slowpoke and Psyduck you might be able to get, so, you know, fingers crossed on all that. And the healing is largely going to be irrelevant because you've got low HP for a Stage 2 and a weakness to Fire. So not entirely ideal, but what does it actually do? Without putting too fine a point on it, it hits the bench. Decidueye goes all after your bench. First attack, 1 grass energy. This attack does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Now the good news is it is one of your opponent's Pokemon, not one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So if you feel so inclined, you can hit the active. And if you're hitting the active, you are hitting for weakness. Remember the general rule in Pokemon, unless a card specifically says so, something like Wide Lens for instance, you're not applying weakness and resistance to bench Pokemon. There we go. Thought that was worth pointing out. Now, the good news is that if your opponent's playing Ditto Prism Star, and that is a card that is seeing a huge amount of play at the moment, you will be able to get a KO on the bench. The bad news is, honestly, there's just not that many people around at the moment who are not evolving their Ditto before you've got a Stage 2 out. If your opponent sees that you've got to Rowlet down, they're going to go, hang on a second, Decidueye's coming out, and hopefully they'll remember what Decidueye does. Incidentally, all the other Decidueye have rotated out, it is this or bust, and they're going to go, we should probably get on with, it's probably time to evolve this before it gets KO'd, and that's a bit of a problem, frankly. Because if you see the Ditto evolving, you're not getting a KO, and then, yeah, things are getting a little bit worse. And 40 to the bench is, it's alright, but we see this on Garchomp and Giratina. Garchomp and Giratina have an attack that hits 40 damage to the bench for a single energy. But they have the advantage of being a basic Pokemon. Okay, they give up free prizes, admittedly. Of course, it's got 270 HP. But 1 colorless energy, 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's that attack. But it's on a Stage 2. Now, there's plenty of Pokemon around at the moment, like Pidgeotto's a good one. And Pidgeotto's sitting there with 60 HP. So maybe if you've been able to spread a bit of damage around earlier on, you can use to start picking off those Pidgeottos. And that's quite nice, that'll help. If this did 60 and you could pick off Pidgeotto, and you could pick off stuff like Inkay, I am all in favour. But it doesn't, so you can't, and I'm just a little bit like, meh. But what about the second attack here? Tracking Shot. 2 colourless energy, and it does 80 damage to the active Pokemon, and 80 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that already has any damage counters on it. Now, if we just add up the damage here, we're talking 160 damage for 2 energy. And 160 damage for 2 energy is, I believe at least, unquestionably awesome. Now, to take another Pokemon that is a stage 2, how about Haxorus? You see, Haxorus here attacks for 2 energy, but it's got an ability once during your turn you may discard a stadium in play, and then attach up to 3 in any combination of fire and metal energy from your hand to this Pokemon. So you can attach 4 energy in 1 turn, and you are actually doing 170, not 160, but you got to actually get 4 energy on there, and you got to have 4 energy in your hand in order to actually make this work. That is, shall we say, ladies and gentlemen, less than ideal. This just does 160. Now, the problem is, it doesn't actually do 160. If it actually did 160, you'd be getting a 1-hit KO on a Dedenne and a 1-hit KO on a Jirachi, etc. It doesn't actually do that, unfortunately. But what it does do is 2-hit KO 2 Dedenne or 2 Jirachi. And then you just cross your fingers that your opponent isn't playing something like Mixed Herbs or Super Scoop Up that they will be able to use to essentially eradicate all of the damage that you did, which would be very sad. Okay, fair enough. Be better if we were just doing 160, wouldn't it? Can't have it all. And the other thing to point out here, of course, is Mew. Mew is an issue, because Mew's got that bench barrier ability whereby your opponent takes no damage to their bench Pokemon. And that's kind of your entire deal here. The entire point here is to try and do damage to your opponent's bench Pokemon. 40 with the first attack and 80 with the second. And that's not great, ladies and gentlemen. Not if they got a Mew out. Now, you can always try and use something like Custom Catcher to gust up the Mew and then start doing it next turn, but then you're just in a bit of an awkward situation of having to use a bunch of resources to take out a 60 HP Pokemon. Though I suppose you could play your own Mew and 2-hit KO their Mew on the bench, but that's, I would argue, an even worse scenario again. If you can get damage on, this is really good, and we've got some options, but I don't know how many of them are awesome. Pre-rotation or in Expanded, you got the old Decidueye, which just has an ability that drops 2 damage counters, and that's really nice. But then again, that's rotated, and even if it hadn't, we'd need Forest of Giant Plants. Although, to be fair, we do have the new Volcarona GX, if you're in the mood. And Volcarona GX has a very similar ability. Now, you do have to discard a fire energy from your hand, but then you get to put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So if you're willing to play fire energy here, you can use Volcarona, and then you can be dropping damage counters, and it's actually looking pretty good at that stage, ladies and gentlemen. That's kind of cool. That could actually really help. That could be the thing that makes this good. Because the other options, you got like Wheezing if your opponent's Pokemon are basics, and Shrine of Punishment for GXs. We've even got Noivern that for 1 colourless energy does 20 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon while having free retreat itself. And I think if you're not using Volcarona, Noivern's probably your best option. And I think you're probably playing Shrine of Punishment anyway just to try and get GXs. But if you add it all up together, this could work. The first attack's uninspiring, but the second attack here, 80 to the active, 80 to one of the bench, if you're using it with Shrine of Punishment and Volcarona, and crucially, Shrine of Punishment and Volcarona are not attacks. You're talking Stadium and ability, so you can do that in addition to your attacks. We could make this work. Now, incidentally, Volcarona's ability needing to discard fire energy shouldn't be a huge problem, because you need to pay 2 energy to attach here, and really we're looking Welder, or we're looking triple acceleration energy, potentially both. So you're going to need fire energy. And then you can use Giant Half to try and get the energy out, although do of course remember that if you're using Giant Half, that is going to potentially scupper Shrine of Punishment, so you're going to have to pick one. I don't like the weakness, and I don't like that it's a stage 2. And I think the two of those things together could be what hurts Decidueye. but it's an easy to pay for attack that does a lot of damage and has some obvious partners. I think this could be a fun deck. Stage 2 Terrible Weakness could be what stops it ever being truly competitive, but it is at least worth a play, and I'm going to be giving it 3 Wassies. But I'd like to know what you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassiePlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't even have any Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.